you and this person are now joined to tackle problems together. And it would be silly of us to assume that after we get married that like our each individual problems aren't going to happen anymore.
Why we fall in love and why we stay in love are different reasons. And hopefully your love is growing over time. But successful marriages, people that are married, statistically, they actually show are more resilient to disease and illness. I mean, the science is clear, better together.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People, episode 67. My guest today is Dr. Anabelle Bugatti. Dr. Belle is an international speaker, a distinguished therapist, and a relationship expert from Las Vegas, Nevada. She holds a PhD in couples therapy and is a certified emotionally focused therapist. In her career, she helps people in lots of ways focus on improving their relationships, mental health, personal growth, and navigating all of the complexities of it. In this episode, expect to learn about her story and how she got interested in the kind of work that she engages with, the various purposes of marriage in the modern world, some of the key characteristics to a long-lasting, healthy, and happy marriage, and much more. If you guys are on YouTube, before the show begins, please remember to head on down and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our post notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you're listening, you think of someone who would enjoy it too, please consider sending them the link so they can listen too. Without further ado, enjoy the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really looking forward to this. I think that marriage is a conversation. It's pertinent to me because I'm getting married in October.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I think we're in like a funny phase, at least from my perspective, of views on marriage. I've spoken to a man named Chris Bullivant, who is a surveyor, researcher, and he works closely with a guy named Brad Wilcox, who is a sociologist at the University of Virginia, and he studies marriage. And he had a book earlier this year that came out called Get Married. The subtitle is, I don't want to get this wrong, I'm going to read it: Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Bonds, and Save Civilization.
Mm-hmm.
We talked at lengths about the various facets of marriage and the importance of it, et cetera. But I left that conversation feeling like we talked almost exclusively from a male perspective. Like we brought up a lot of Andrew Tate and like the weird contemporary masculine, bizarre viewpoints of, why you shouldn't get married and things like that. And I think that there is room to have a more, I guess, well-rounded conversation about the topic. And so I think that you will be a great person to speak to about this.
I'm excited.
Could you start with a brief overview? I think it would be relevant for listeners to see, where you're coming from, the kind of work that you engage with, things like that.
Yeah, well, I go by Dr. Belle online or Dr. Anabelle Bugatti in my practice. I have a private practice here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I have my PhD in couples counseling, and I'm a certified emotionally focused supervisor and therapist. I help train other therapists in the model of emotionally focused therapy, pioneered by Sue Johnson. And EFT is awesome because it's actually the APA gold standard of couples counseling. And I've been through couples counseling before. I became a therapist and it was terrible. And when I decided to become a couples therapist, I wanted to use something that worked. And, I didn't want to give to my clients the terrible therapy experiences that I had had. So I love that, we know that EFT works. We know why it works. We know how it works. It gets to the heart of the matter. To me, it gets to the heart of people in a very non-judgmental way. And it's very empowering, and it's amazing. So I work with couples. I do intensives. I do regular therapy also with individuals. And, my work ranges anywhere from helping couples in crisis, recovering from affairs, or couples just wanting to, brush up their sexual relationship and intimacy, I say number one reason that brings couples to therapy is communication problems. And, I also specialize in ADHD as a person who is um, neurodivergent and has ADHD. I'm very passionate about helping people understand how to work with their ADHD and manage it so it doesn't rule their life and they can actually harness it for success. And so many people just get misdiagnosed and misunderstood. Even society drives me crazy. Like all the stuff I see out there just feels like they still don't get it for all the research that they're trying to tell me about my brain, and they've never actually asked me about my brain. So anyway, but yeah, so I believe in love and relationships, and I just want to help people be the best version of themselves and have the best that life has to offer for them.
You mentioned that the sort of experiences you've had with your own, couple type of couples therapy sort of propelled you into this. If you don't mind sharing, what were some of the aspects about, I guess, the thing that you were exposed to that left a bad taste in your mouth that pushed you towards wanting to pursue a better path?
Yeah, well, one of the experiences I had, so I had a range of experiences. My first experience with couples counseling was through a pastoral counselor at our church, and he actually ended up being phenomenal. He actually studied counseling. There's a lot of pastoral counselors who, get their degree in theology, and they're taught counseling as part of their theological work, but they don't a lot of them don't actually get degrees in counseling. Some of them do, and they're much better. But my first therapist was really, really amazing, and I learned a lot about myself and a lot about the myths and beliefs that I had about marriage going in. I've been married before, and I've experienced the pain of divorce, unfortunately. And I can say my love life is redeemed, and I'm married to an incredible man, the love of my life, and I'm so thankful and blessed. But divorce is hard and painful, and one of the bad experiences I had, I was living in New York getting my master's degree, and there's a wide range of therapists out there. And one therapist actually came to our house, our apartment, which was odd. And she just sit there and let us like yell at each other. The session went way over. And then her only intervention was like, you two just need to think positive and remember why you got together. And I'm like, whoa, this is so misattuned and not even close to what's happening. And remembering why we fell in love is not going to help us solve our actual problems, So that was really terrible. And then I had another therapist who just sat and scratched his head and looked at us kind of perplexed. He was probably the best of the ones that we found. And he just looked kind of perplexed. And every once in a while, he'd sort of reflect what we were both saying, but he didn't actually like offer any help or suggestions or clarity. And that was the best that we had experienced. And I think we went to probably 3 or 4 different therapists.
I think this will be a good frame for the conversation that we're going to have. And I'm curious, I guess, from like a practitioner standpoint, what do you feel like it is that your job is supposed to be? So like, I know you mentioned like a couple examples there of some of the therapists that you worked with. What exactly is it that you're there to offer? Is it sharing sides? Is it, obviously you're not picking a side. Is it just sort of getting the other person to understand each other's perspective? Maybe expand a little bit on that.
And I love that you asked that question. It's really beautiful. And I still see therapists struggling with this, and it's very disheartening, even though ethically we're not supposed to be picking sides or even telling couples what they should do about their relationship. And I can't tell you how many times I've had couples come to me after seeing another therapist, and they're like, our therapist called my spouse narcissistic and said we should break up or get divorced. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe that. For so many reasons. But really, what I do is in a very non-pathological framework where I get underneath what I see on the surface. And really in EFT, we see ourselves as more process facilitators because look, people are smart and they can learn a whole lot from self-help books. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. If they knew how to use those, they wouldn't be coming to me, right? So the problem is on a deeper level. And basically, I get in there and I get underneath the surface level and figure out what's happening between them that has them stuck where they're not even able to solve their own problems, that they need to come to a therapist and ask the therapist to be mediator. So not only, do I get underneath to figure out what the process is that's happening to help them solve their own problems, but also figure out What's keeping them from being able to bond and be close and have intimacy and fun and joy together in the way that they both want? And so we really get to the heart, the guts, deconstruct the negative, rebuild in a collaborative way a better, stronger connection. And I give them a process that they can use taking out of that so then they can solve their own problems. Because if I solve their problems, then guess what? Every time they have an issue that they're stuck on, they're going to come to me. And I don't want that. I actually want them to get better and not need to have a therapist, you know?
Yeah.
You shouldn't need to be a therapist to have a great relationship.
Yeah. I'm curious. It sounds like there's a bit of I mean, this is like everything, right? It just depends. Whatever you do, it depends on the individual, sort of what purpose it serves. And it kind of sounds like you believe that to be true about marriage. Like marriage. My question is, what is the point of marriage, or what is the purpose of marriage? But it kind of sounds like you're alluding to it being sort of whatever the couple intends for it to be.
Yeah, I mean, marriage is a type of commitment. Really, I think the question is more philosophical about what role do they want their relationship to serve in their life, and how much energy are they willing to put into their relationship, whether they're married or not married, and do they have um, a healthy relationship with themselves and a healthy foundation from which to build a relationship. Because I see a lot of people not putting in their own work and just expecting to find the right partner and saying, well, when I find the right partner, I'm just going to be the right partner. It's like going to a job interview and saying, well, when you just give me the job, then I'll take the classes and become qualified. That's never going to happen, right? It's like you should work on yourself and become the best partner. So you're in a healthier place to attract the right partner, but you'll also be in a healthier place that if the wrong partner presents himself, you're going to be able to know it and be able to set boundaries and not stay in a relationship that's not good for you.
When I talked to Chris, we talked a lot about this emerging view. And again, I would just probably preface it with, it seems like it was a more masculine take, but that marriage is sort of this legal trap. And maybe it's even not. Like, now that I think about it, I would say there's probably dialogue on both sides. That marriage is sort of this legal trap, and like a loving commitment isn't something that you have to ratify through the government, right? And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. What would you say to people who say that marriage is this legal trap that you're getting yourself
Well,
into?
it's a very reductive argument. And somebody who says that they see marriage as any sort of a trap already tells me they're not coming from a healthy framework. Like, they're probably hurt, been hurt, and what you're hearing is insecurity coming from, and it's insecurity in the form of avoidance. Like, somehow if I avoid getting married, I'm going to avoid hurt if this falls apart. No, you're not going to avoid the hurt. Trust me. It still hurts just as much whether you're legally married. And, if you really love somebody and you're all in, and again, this is dependent on who you marry. Hopefully you're spending time to properly vet your partner, again, that you're healthy, you're entering into a relationship with a healthy person, and you're both committed to working towards and maintaining a healthy relationship. And so, if you're thinking that marriage is a trap in and of itself, it just says that, there's an unhealthy perspective there, and avoiding marriage isn't going to change that. And there's all kinds of, like, if you really love someone and you're invested, marriage offers legal protection for them. Why wouldn't you want to protect the one you love and the life that you guys have built together? And if you come into marriage later in life with assets, there's all kinds of legal protections. So it's not a trap. There's plenty of ways. Like, a trap suggests there's no way out of it. And there is no way out of a committed relationship without hurt, unless you're just not really attaching in a healthy way. You can't expect to have all the benefits of a healthy, wonderful relationship without putting 100% effort into contributing to that. So, yeah, it's definitely not a trap. And if that's your perspective, I would suggest get into therapy and work through some of the the emotional hurt that's probably hiding out that either you've witnessed from your friends going through it, your parents, or maybe you yourself have seen it. But there's all kinds of legal protections. So I would not want to be in any kind of relationship that somebody views as a trap, you know?
Hmm.
And in fact, I think couples that cohabitate and don't have those legal protections, it's far more murky when things break up because
Uh,
they didn't have anything legally defined, and you have some common law marriages, and the way the law divides assets, it's much more complicated than if you're married and it's detailed in a prenuptial agreement or even a postnuptial agreement. So,
yeah, I think that just to add like a personal anecdote, something that I've thought about in this context recently is that um, I think I just wrote my wedding vows yesterday, actually,
aw.
and I'd like to think I did a bang up job, but in doing so, I was just like looking over some various ways you could structure wedding vows, etc., to make sure I, didn't say anything I wasn't supposed to say. But I feel like a big part of that, especially towards the end, is like the in sickness, in health, and in health
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
or no matter what, through the trials and triumphs of whatever relationship
Mm-hmm.
uh, that you're going to have, there's this piece that's like we're committing ourselves to each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, kind of to bring back what you said at the beginning, a lot of people almost view that as like, just remember why you fell in love. But I don't really think that that is what that means. I think that means that you should kind of go into it with the understanding that you and this person are now joined to tackle problems together. And it would be
Right.
silly of us to assume that after we get married that like our each individual problems aren't going to happen anymore. And
Right.
so, there's a myriad of situations that could happen to people and to a couple, but
And I think why we fall in love and why we stay in love are different reasons. And hopefully your love is growing over time. But if somebody's saying, yeah, I love my partner and I'm in it, but then when things get hard or their partner gets sick and they're like, oh, I'm not really in it, I'd say that person maybe wasn't totally in love with their partner. That maybe they were more in love in a very shallow way, but not fully attached. I mean, think about it. What if you were the one who was sick? Would you want to be abandoned by the one you loved the most that you committed to because you got sick, because you got cancer or something else that you couldn't control? I mean, that's awful. And, you know, successful marriages, people that are married, statistically, they actually show are more resilient to disease and illness. And their overall well being, both psychological and physiological, are much higher. So you have a better shot. I mean, the science is clear, better together. So I think when you're vowing, make sure that you have a really clear idea about what you are vowing to, that you are not going into this with myths about what hard times look like, um, that you know about yourself and your own ability to stay committed when times get tough and how you would want to be treated if you went through something tough. And if you expect to be left when things are tough or you lose your looks or something, again, I would say not a healthy framework. Go to therapy, work on the issues, so that you can become the healthy partner and expect health from a relationship and welcome a healthy partner into your life.
this is kind of a really weird aside, but I should mention it because it popped in my head and it's really fascinating to me. I went to James Madison University and I studied
Mhm.
communications, but I took some sort of geology class or geography class rather, as like a general education class. And there is a teacher at JMU. His name's Matt Rutherford. I'm actually not sure if he was in the military or if he was like overseas on a defense contract or something, but he told his whole story about being in an armored vehicle when an IED went off, and he lost both of his, I think, from the knee down on both legs. And he lived, obviously, and a lot of the work that he does now is he worked actually pretty closely with Princess Diana
Mhm.
when she was alive, but disarming IEDs and post-war areas, etc. But he showed this really insane statistic that just blew my mind. And and this was specifically for male female relationships, so I understand there's exceptions to this, right? But
Sure.
in a male female relationship, if the male of the relationship uh specifically lost a limb, it was like 95+% of all of their female counterparts stayed with them. And in the inverse, if a female lost a limb, it was like almost 0% of those relationships lasted, which is like, it blew my mind. And I've always been
Mhm.
curious as to why that is. Is it like a physiological, biological thing that, the male thinking? Is it the values that we place on female partners? I don't know, but I thought that I would share that with you because what you said kind of reminded me of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be an interesting study to, if I was conducting a study about that, I would actually put into the survey what their reasons were for leaving, because it may not be what you think it is, right? We'd like to say that it falls under some cliche about the importance men place on physical looks, but that's really not fair to men because it's not all about looks. Yes, I think they're important to everybody, but there are beautiful people out there who are jerks, and that makes them ugly. And there's people out there who aren't the most, they're not supermodels, but they have beautiful personalities. They're amazing to be around, and that makes them beautiful. So, and from what I know from working with couples, again, unless somebody got into a relationship for more superficial reasons, and I see a lot of people again who really misunderstand what marriage is about, and somehow they think it's some magic blanket that is just going to cover all, just by magic of getting this piece of paper, that it's going to change things. And it's like, it's just another type of commitment. It's the deepest level of commitment you can have with someone, that you love, aside from like the spiritual commitment, the physical commitment. And it's both private and public and legal. But you know, unless they married them for superficial reasons, I'm going to guess there's probably something else at work as to why they might have left the relationship. And it could be, maybe resiliency. Like, I've seen a lot of partners where they've lost a limb, and their whole self-esteem goes away, and they've not gone to therapy to rebuild. And it's just become this vortex where their connection has fallen in, and they just sort of given up on life. And it can be so hard to be with a partner who won't fight for the relationship, not just for their own life, but for the relationship, right? Because there's still two people here. And I do work with a lot of couples where one partner, even it's even more difficult, I think, when they're younger and one partner gets diagnosed with a really debilitating disease. And it does affect both of them because it affects the way they can socialize and go out and do fun things as a couple, and their life is different and limited. And it happened early. I think a lot of people understand that will likely happen when they get much older, but when it happens at an age they don't expect, it's like, well, now we can't enjoy the quality of life that we wanted to have. And that affects our coupleship. And not only do we have to give empathy for the person who's in a lot of pain and struggling and suffering with the illness or whatever it is, but there's also the caretaker. And we have to talk about the things that no one's ever really allowed to talk about. Like, what is it actually like to always take care of someone and to feel that loss of, we don't even get a normal social life together. And that really misses out. Maybe we don't get a normal sexual life together because, there's, some physical setbacks or challenges that we're presented with, and so having to talk about those things again in a non-pathological kind of way. We want to hold space for both, but some tough conversations that we have. And again, I really think the biggest thing is assess people's motives, why they're going in, and that will have a big impact on their motives of getting out.
There needs to be a bit more, I guess, forethought. I would
Mhm.
imagine this is probably more true for the young people,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, to the fact that you are committing to take on a lot of the burden of the other person in many ways and
Mhm.
share that
Mhm.
burden. And
Mhm.
uh, if you have accepted that, obviously moving forward with when things do pop up is a lot easier versus if you haven't really given that any ground or thought in
Yeah.
your brain, it's difficult to accept.
And they're willing to take it on for you as well, And again, lots of people have a beautiful life together, nothing bad ever happens. And I have a lot of couples that have faced, tremendous, things. They've overcome cancer, multiple cancer diagnoses, just all kinds of terrible things. And their marriages are amazing, so, but I do think that people, again, go into marriage with this idea that it's romantic and it's something that we want to do, and it's great, but they don't really put a lot of forethought into what does marriage actually mean? What does it actually mean to be a spouse, to have a spouse? What is marriage going to demand of me? And am I willing to do what it takes to rise to the challenge, to be the best I can be?
So my fiance and I started dating in May of 2020, which was like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I've actually spoken to a handful of researchers on this, and I can't recall anything specific, but I do remember having the dialogue that there probably will be some sort of conflict management or like stress related management that her and I will have together, because we've sort of, we basically fell in love through this sort of global hard thing that everybody was going through. And because like even at the time, her and I obviously probably dealt with that a little bit better than other people, and we had resources that we could handle it, and neither of us were very affected, or our families, in a lot of ways. But going through like such a big thing early on, it sort of give us this crazy set point that it almost is easy to overcome
Yeah.
smaller minute challenges. And I think that that is something that is interesting, and I wonder how that will play out for the generation of people that are my age who got married, or who started relationships at a similar time.
It's a lovely perspective. And, I think definitely major life situations will certainly test relationships and show each person individually what they're made out of, and how they deal with adversity is going to directly impact how the coupleship gets through it. Again, it sort of depends on how people got into the relationship and what sort of roles people play in life and what they're looking for in a relationship. I've seen people who coped differently in one situation, but then went through something dramatically different later in life, and it was completely the opposite. And it felt very unexpected and blindsided by their partner. And that, I think that's another truth, is that people do change throughout relationships. And it's I kind of correlate it to, like, Apple. If you all have iPhones, they're always sending you alerts, like ridiculous amounts of alerts, saying there's an update to your apps or your operating system, and they're constantly going through changes, but they give you the courtesy of an alert that says, hey, there's a change. And often we as people change, but it doesn't even occur to us to talk about it with our partner. When we notice ourselves differently, we just assume that because they live next to us and sleep in the same bed, that they must automatically see our changes or be able to make sense out of them the way that we do. But again, they're just on the outside looking in, and we don't know how much they're observing, or that the way that they're making meaning out of what you're doing is the same. So it's important to keep staying in conversation, and that'll set you guys up best for success, whether you go through hopefully we never deal with something like COVID, but if you go through another hardship, again, get to know how you each individually deal with adversity, and how you bring that together as a couple, and what your group strategy is.
Yeah. I think that's really sound advice, because, obviously I think anybody who's married can probably relate that the months leading up to it feel sort of turbulent, and in that way, like as an individual, right? You're expecting this big change, and things are going to change. And we've certainly gone through that. I think more specifically, I have certainly gone through that. And I think one of the biggest challenges is, and this is probably my biggest drawback as a communicator, is I don't like not knowing what's happening to me. And so because of that, it's super easy for me to sort of shut down. Like I need to figure it out first. But I think even saying something along the lines of, hey, I think things are changing. I'm feeling differently about certain things, like not us, but and I don't quite know how to place it yet, but as I'll keep you updated per se. And I think even having a dialogue like that is probably going to be way more productive than just shutting down entirely.
Yes, yes, because when you shut down, the other person is going to make meaning out of that. And usually, they're unsure why the shutdown. They make meaning of it like, I'm not important, I don't matter. They may feel abandoned or rejected. So even to be able to say, hey, like, maybe you guys are having a tough conversation and a lot starts coming up. I just need a few minutes to process, or can I take in what you're saying and have a day to sort of think on it and come up with something more meaningful? And, I think as long as your partner knows there's a process happening and that you're actually going to come back, yes, it will do a world of good.
What would you say are some of the biggest and most defining characteristics that you can identify for people that are in successful, long-lasting marriages?
Yeah. Well, and from all the research, and again, the model of counseling I use is based on attachment science, and I love it. I call attachment science the science about how we human, because it accounts for how we feel, how we behave, and how we, allow ourselves to get close to other people or not get close to other people. It talks about how we regulate or don't regulate emotions, and it's basically a handbook for just how we human, and it's amazing. And what the research is very clear about couples that have successful relationships, and that each partner is emotionally accessible and responsive and engaged. So going back to like the shutdown may send a signal that I'm not very open and available for my partner. And when they do try to approach, I shut down, which I'm also not giving a response. Or if I get quiet, I may not be very engaged. And you can have, partners that are also more outwardly vocal that also aren't responsive. They may just, in distressed couples, I've seen them sort of run over each other. And, again, it's not always, I don't want it to seem like it's just the withdrawing partner, because there can be lack of healthy stuff on both sides. But couples that are truly emotionally available, accessible to me is synonymous with available, that, my partner can come to me, again, timing may need to be a factor. If I've just had a difficult, stressful day at work and my boss was extra hard on me, probably not the best time to have a deep conversation about our marriage, but we need to be available to have those conversations and to be able to stay in the conversation and tolerate it and be able to hear what our partner's saying and respond. Even if what they're saying, we don't agree with it, I think if you just validate how they sort of like what they're seeing, and there's a difference between validating sort of the behaviors they're observing versus the meaning they're making out of it. Because that's where a lot of people get stuck, is like their partner will observe a behavior and immediately assign meaning to it that goes to the negative. And the other person is sort of defending the meaning because the meaning doesn't match. But it's like, if you sort of go back and say, okay, I understand when I did XYZ, that meant to you blah, blah, blah. But really, and I can understand how on the outside looking in, you might have constructed that. But here's what's really going on. And that can help someone feel like the reality isn't like crazy, that they are seeing something and they're less likely to get as reactive. And again, it builds trust that I know if I go to you and I talk to you, I don't get dismissed, that you're someone I can talk to. And also, can I share vulnerability with you? And can you be vulnerable with me? A lot of people want to take care of a partner, but they struggle with allowing their partner to take care of themselves. And again, allowing someone to help take care of you doesn't mean that you can't take care of yourself. But we're also not designed to take care of ourselves all the time. Those are short-term survival strategies, not meant for the long haul. And allowing someone to help us also offset some of our own energy expenditure so that we have more energy to give back to life, to the fights that we have to fight, the dragons we have to slay, outside of the home. And it conserves a lot of energy. So, being able to do vulnerability, being able to respond to our partner if they have tears, if they come to us with something vulnerable or even something difficult, hey, something that you said really hurt my feelings, without getting defensive or shutting them down or saying you're crazy, and allowing them, bringing your full self into the relationship and allowing them to really see who you are and love who you are and to take care of that. You can still take care of yourself when you're on your own, but the point is you don't have to. And so let them, it's like a sacred duty as a spouse, is that I get to take care of the concerns of your heart and your needs in a way that no one else does. And that makes this very special and sacred and something I want to do for you. And often when people feel shut out of being allowed to take care of their partner, they feel like, well, what do I really offer? Feels like my partner doesn't really need me. They don't see my value and they could live without me. So then it starts to erode the security of the bond. Like if they don't really need me or see that I bring them anything, any value to their life, why would they stay? And so that can start to erode the bond. So again, just that safe emotional connection, again, where partners feel valued and understood, having that regular, meaningful communication, having empathy and support, not just during good times, but during challenging times, having positive interactions too, having fun and joy and being able to play together. Are we having, the kind of love life that we want to have? Are we having the kind of sex life we want to have? And are we able to come together and work and co-create the kind of relationship we both want to have, where we're both coming towards each other and meeting each other where they're at? And, you know, I think one of the biggest things that and even Sue Johnson talks about this, she's the pioneer of emotionally focused therapy, says the key thing that separates couples who end up in divorce versus the couples that don't are the ones who can repair. There's no model of counseling or couples therapist in the world that can prevent a couple from fighting. And that's not the point. Conflict is necessary and it helps couples work things out and together. Of course, if they don't have healthy fighting strategies, then they get stuck there and it just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating and starts to become this chasm in their marriage that just starts to tear it apart. But the couples that can solve conflict together and get connected also are able to repair. Repair is that one thing that separates those couples from divorce versus the couples that stay together, is the ability to repair. And couples often that come to my office, what I see is they get stuck in conflict and there is no repair. And that's where their relationship starts to go in Mayday mode. So, having that ability to repair, conflict resolution, having meaning and goals that's shared together, that you guys are sort of on board about what you want out of life, where you'd like to go with your life, what your sense of purpose is. And that's something we have both individually, but we also co-create as a couple, because the couple also has an identity. And again, that couples have the kind of physical intimacy that they want to have. And if they're not, again, are we willing to go get the help that we need in order to be able to have that? So it's just amazing to me how many people, it's like, Tiger Woods didn't pop out of the womb being Tiger Woods. He had to enlist the help of a pro to become Tiger Woods. So, we're not all born with the skills to be the Tiger Woods in our relationships and have that quality of success. It takes help, it takes training, it takes work, but you can. And, just being able to have and maintain a secure, loving attachment bond and connection is central to keeping couples together.
I appreciate this kind of dialogue for a number of reasons. So I majored in communications. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I took a class called Communication in Romantic Relationships. And it was with Dr. Jenny Rocher. She's actually been on my podcast, I think, twice now. And we talked a lot about attachment theory, and she does a lot of work on attachment theory. And at least when I was in like high school and college, and you like date people and break up, and your friends are dating people and breaking up, and you're going through all of this, I feel like a common thing people say is like, oh, it just wasn't for me. Like I need to take some time to work on myself. And I think that that's like such a valid statement in a vacuum, but I feel like a lot of people use it as a cop out because, I don't know, at least with my friends, I never really noticed them doing anything different after after they were
Yeah.
just single again, and then they were looking for another partner, right?
Well, so as a good friend that you are you able to have those conversations with them? Like, hey, I heard you say that you want to work on yourself, but I sort of noticed this pattern that you're kind of doing the same. I'm just kind of curious. Like, can you tell me about your journey of working on yourself?
Yeah. I think that that's like a really really sound. I have the luxury that I have like the best friends ever, and they're all like great people. And
It's
um,
awesome.
I don't know how that worked out for me, but um, in any case, I think why this is important is because this is perhaps a bit philosophical in nature, but I think it's important to bring up is that a relationship is neither about just the two of you, and it's neither about just yourself as an individual. And I think that a lot of contemporary viewpoints fall in one of those two categories. Like if you just work on yourself and you show up, your relationship's going to be good. Or if you just work on the relationship and show up, you're going to be good. But neither of those are true. And you
Right.
need to simultaneously, at least sounds like what you were saying,
Because the two
work
parts
on
have to fit together.
right.
But often it's becomes like I'm going to stand on my side of the fence and point the finger at you and say you need to move first and you need to get better before I'm actually willing. Like I'll change after you change. And it's like no, take responsibility. And I hate this cliche: marriages are 50-50. What that tells me is that two people are just half-assing it.
Mm.
Relationships should be 100%, 100%. Everybody should be giving 100%. Sometimes you need to carry more of the weight in the relationship. Other times your partner may have to. But yes, you do got to work on yourself and you got to take accountability for that. And a lot of people come and say, well, why should I? Because it's the right thing to do. It's part of having integrity in a relationship and as a human is that you want to be showing up as your best. And that is going to be one of your best chances for success in the relationship. But you also need to know that you have a partner who's also doing the same and that you guys can come together and not just work on yourselves individually, but you got to work on fitting those two pieces together. It's kind of like the spindles in a machine is that they have to be able to line up and sync up. And so, or like partners who dance, you may be a terrific dancer on your own, both of you, but if you can't get together and synchronize with each other, then there's going to be some problems. So I love what you said. It's not just about you individually. It's not just you as a couple. It's all of the above.
Yeah, and I think what your statement there just brought up too is that it's going to change over time. Some of the time you'll carry more, some of the time they'll carry more, but also like maybe they'll carry a little bit more so you can go work on yourself a little bit more because there is this problem that you brought up. And I think again, it's cliche, but the common phrase of like it's not you versus me, it's you and I versus the problem. I think that that's just a really easy way to sum it up, right?
Yeah. But a lot of couples don't know how to do that. They don't know how to talk about the problem without demonizing their partner and attacking their partner. So they end up attacking each other, and then each other looks like the enemy, even though it's actually the place they get stuck in EFT. We call it the cycle, or just the pattern couples get stuck in. That's the real enemy that keeps them from them two together facing the problem. And actually, our neurology has an order of operations there. A lot of people try to problem solve first and then thinking that's going to solve the connection. But actually, according to our neurology, the order of operations is we need to work on the connection first, get our brain out of the threatened state, because again, attachment is actually wired into the survival part of our brain. And so when that part of our brain is soothed and we no longer feel danger of not being loved or accepted or our relationship being in danger, then actually the rest of our brain comes back online and we can now work together to problem solve the problem that's in front of us. So, in EFT, that's what we do is actually work better with your neurology instead of trying to fight it and force you to do what we know you're not going to be able to do in the situations where it matters most.
What advice do you have for general people about that? Like, I assume probably best case scenario, like work with some kind of therapist, like you just mentioned with the Tiger Woods analogy. But I imagine there's people out there that maybe need it more than others, don't have the resources to tackle that just yet. But what are some, I guess, strategies or resources that you'd point people to check?
I'd say that not having the resources can also be a cop out because I know a lot of people, regardless of their economic status, that have iPhones. And we have this handy free app called Google. And there's a lot of self help. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. Yeah, some of it's not very good sound advice, but, there's a lot of avenues, even if you don't have, money to pay for a therapist, and there's a lot of free programs and clinics out there. But I think people, again, I think work on being the right person before you expect the other person to be the right person. And are you able to honestly look at yourself and have friends that are going to be honest with you, that are willing to lovingly hold up the mirror and say, hey, yeah, you do a lot of things well, but here's something that we all see that maybe you could work on and would help your relationship. I just see a lot of people come in and they're doing these really hurtful things to their partner and justifying it because they feel hurt. And it's like, you know, they just do these things over and over and over again while saying, my partner needs to be better and be the right person. It's like, okay, be accountable for your part. Even if your partner's doing the wrong thing, handling it in the way that they're currently handling it isn't going to make it better. So no matter what, have integrity. And integrity is not just what you do when nobody's looking. It's doing the right thing when it's hardest to do so. So equip yourself with relational integrity. Find out who you are, how you handle adversity, and try to get a really clear look at yourself from people that you know are loving, but also honest. I won't say objective because people that know you aren't objective per se, but they are able to look at the whole picture and say, hey, but you want a friend who's able to help you know the things that you could work on without making you feel like crap. Those are the good friends, because we all need sometimes to get that swift kick in our pants, from our friends, so we can look at ourselves and, get that healthy perspective. But we don't want someone who causes us to feel like we're unlovable or unworthy. And certainly if you are carrying that feeling around on the inside, that maybe on the surface I feel pretty good, but actually I do have this deep-seated fear that I'm unworthy, or I'm not going to be loved, that's likely showing up in some of your relationships, some of the ways that you show up to life in general, because we're never not in relationship. And our relationships aren't just romantic, it's the people we work with, the people, like our mentors, our professors, our bosses, our employees, our friends, our siblings, our neighbors. I mean, we're always in relationship with the human race. And just the type of relationship and the intimacy and quality is all different. But how we show up usually is uniformly the same in some ways. So again, just get to know how you are at your worst and work on being the best you can be. But also, I think the biggest thing when you're looking for a partner is make sure that you're joining up with somebody who's also equally committed to working on the relationship with you when things are hard and difficult, and that they're not going to just shut down and say, I don't need to tell a stranger about my problems. We should solve them on our own, even though we're not, right? If you're going to give 100%, you want to know, and that you're willing to do whatever it takes to have health, know that you're with someone who's also going to fight the same. Because the only problem I've seen couples not be able to overcome is the one they won't talk about. So that's my biggest advice, is find someone that you know is well matched in their willingness to work on the relationship. You can't know everything going in, and marriage will shape you in ways that you can't really see ahead of time. But again, the more you know yourself and how you handle adversity, and knowing that at least if you feel over your head, you're willing to seek resources, and your partner also is too, and you guys are willing to do it together, I think you'll be in great shape.
Yeah, I really like the aspect of doing the work there. Like you use that term a lot throughout that sort of monologue, was like work. And whether it's, finding resources that you can afford in many contexts, you actually have to do the work. Whether it's addressing a conflict, you actually have to do the work. You have to take note of how you are and decide to show up differently if it needs it. But I think that the underlying theme there of actually dedicating some focused effort on the thing that you say you want to improve really just comes down to your willingness to actually do the actual work and try to improve it.
And a willingness to look at yourself, because it can be scary. And we all like to think, oh, my way of handling it is so good. And, would your spouse agree? Would your friends agree? And do they even feel safe enough to tell you honestly? That's another, if you ask them and they kind of give you like a kind of look that says they probably don't feel comfortable telling you the truth. And that means you may not be as open and receptive as you think, and maybe get to work on that. Because one of the best skills you can have is attunement. Looking at the people around you in any social situation is the way that you want to be received. You're going to see it on their face, unless they're still facing you, and that's a whole other thing. But, look and see. And if you're not landing on them the way that you want to, then, be willing to work on that. Don't make them at fault because they're experiencing you differently. Work on, what do I need to do so that the way that I want to be experienced is the way that I am being experienced.
Well, awesome. I know we're running close to time here, and so I want to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for willing to do this. I learned a whole lot of stuff from you. I know that people that are listening to the show will learn a lot from you too, but plug your stuff. Where can people go to learn more from you and all the work that you do?
Yeah. So if you're here in Las Vegas, or you want to come to Las Vegas, you can visit my website, lasvegasmarriagecounseling.com, or my general website, drbelle.com. I also have a YouTube channel, We Heart Therapy. It's mainly geared towards other therapists, but I've had a lot of general public find their way and learn about EFT from the videos I do for other therapists. And then they're like, hey, I love EFT. I think that's for us. So yeah, We Heart Therapy on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts, drbelle.com, lasvegasmarriagecounseling.com. Hey, congratulations on your upcoming nuptials. And I hope you guys have an amazing marriage.
Thank you. And thanks again for your time. I'll make sure I plug all that stuff in the description below for anybody that wants to check it out. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. Remember to head on down to the description below to check out Dr. Belle, all of the information that she puts out, and the various resources that she provided. If you guys are on YouTube and you enjoy this conversation as much as I did, please remember to head on down and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our post notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you're listening, you enjoyed, please remember to share this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.